Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It's our fun unit, and today we're going to be talking about plant idioms. Of course, plants are those green things that grow in the ground or in your apartment if you want to make things pretty inside. But we've got some idioms, which are basically clever phrases that we use to describe things, and they involve plants.
Yeah, I love plants. Most of these are familiar to us, at least. The one I had to review will be in day 2. I won't tell you which one yet. But I love plants. Anything in just our everyday lives, our normal lives as we go about living, is sometimes just picked up and used to describe a certain situation. And once you know what that idiom represents, you'll be fine. But we have a lot of them, but you guys have a lot of Chengyu too, so it's fair. It's kind of hard to learn at first, because if you were to just hear some of these words in a conversation and you'd never really studied it would be hard for you to know what they're talking about. We feel the same way when we're trying to learn some Chinese, but these are some really useful phrases, I think, that our writer picked out a group of really great ones. And as Tom said, it's about plants. The first one's right there in the title, Tom, getting to the root of something.
Interesting. That means to find out the basic nature of something. Of course, the base of a plant is its roots underground. So if you get to the root of something, then you try to figure out exactly what it's all about. You go straight to the source, and you don't beat around the bush, which we'll get to later on. That, of course, is another idiom that involves plants. But without any further delay, let's go through our article from top to bottom. We'll read it for you, and then we'll come back to discuss it. Many English idioms comprise references to plants and nature. Just like real flowers brighten up a room, these idioms modify and add decoration to your writing. Here are a few popular ones. Nip something in the bud. A bud is a flower that hasn't bloomed yet. The term comes from horticulture, where cutting or nipping a bud prevents it from flowering or becoming fruit. As a metaphor, to nip something in the bud means to halt it at an early stage or before it even begins. Example: when my son started using bad words he had learned from his friends, I knew I had to nip that behavior in the bud. Turn over a new leaf. This idiom is misleading because the word leaf here doesn't mean those green things that grow on trees. In the 16th century, this word referred to a page in a book. So turning over a new leaf actually meant flipping a page. The idiom evolved to mean starting over. It can be used when someone is transitioning to a new career or making an effort to change their conduct for the better. Example: the criminal turned over a new leaf by volunteering to help the homeless. Beat around the bush. This phrase comes from medieval times. Hunters would appoint people to hit bushes with sticks to scare the animals out. However, they couldn't strike the bush directly, as doing so could be dangerous, so they would literally beat around the bush. Today, it means not being direct, avoiding something, or dodging a question. Example: don't beat around the bush and just tell me why you're annoyed with me.
Let's dive in, guys. We have quite a few idioms over the next 2 days, which are really helpful and useful, I think. And we'll often use them. I use these a lot. I'm just looking at the number of idioms we have. And there's even a famous TV show. It was on about, I guess, 15 years ago. I think it came out while I was in Taiwan, called Pushing Up Daisies, that had an actor in it that I loved. So, yeah, all of these are very familiar to native English speakers. Let me say American English speakers. I don't know about the Brits. They have their own idioms along with some of ours, but some of theirs I don't know either. So let's get going. You know that there's an idiom in the title, which Tom talked about. So we're going to move on to the first paragraph. It says many English idioms comprise references to plants and nature. If you comprise something, it just means it's made up of that, it's composed of that. And there are a lot of idioms that we have that refer back to nature and plants in general because they're all around us. It's part of our everyday life.
Right. A reference, of course, is mentioning some information from another source, I could say, for example, the boss's speech contained many references to Shakespeare. Of course, Shakespeare has lots of quotes that people like to use all the time. And in this particular case, we're talking about English idioms that have or comprise references to plants and nature. And just like real flowers brighten up a room, these idioms modify and add decoration to your writing. So indeed, flowers or plants will brighten up a room, which means it makes it more pleasant. It looks more attractive, and people are happy when they go in there. Oh, you've got all those flowers. Isn't that nice? And just like those flowers brightening up a room, these idioms can modify and add decoration to your writing. It can make your writing more colorful, more beautiful, more interesting. And here are a few popular ones. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is nipping something in the bud. To nip something in the bud. And here it says a bud is a flower that hasn't bloomed yet. That's what a bud is. You've probably seen them on plants. You'll see them in the spring quite often before the flowers come out. You've got buds there. And oftentimes a flower forms and then later the flower falls away and then the fruit forms in the middle there. I think that happens with cherry trees or other kinds of fruit trees.
Oh, yeah, apple as well. I know for a fact. Yeah.
And maybe pears and peaches too. Yes, indeed. So you've got that bud, but it hasn't bloomed yet. And the term comes from horticulture, where cutting or nipping a bud prevents it from flowering or becoming fruit. Now, horticulture is the science of gardening, okay? It's different from botany.
Right.
Botany is the study of plants in general, but if you want to be more specific, then you can talk about horticulture, which is all about gardens and what you do to raise flowers and plants in your garden.
Yeah, and we call someone who loves getting involved with this or has a hobby with horticulture a horticulturalist. That is hard to say. So if you know someone who likes to do this sort of thing, that's what you call them. I love plants. I don't have as many flowers in my apartment, but I do have some gardenias outside my window and some jasmine, and that really makes it smell good. But yeah, we talk about nipping something in the bud when you want to stop something before it gets too big or too out of control. Maybe you have a toddler or a small child who likes to throw fits, you know, when they're not getting what they want, they throw themselves down on the floor and they scream and, you know, they're just, it's a mess. If you want to nip that behavior in the bud, you want to do it before that child believes that that's the way to get what he or she wants. Oh, I'll just scream and cry until my mom or dad gives me what I want. You want to nip that in the bud. Ooh, got to nip that in the bud before he turns into a monster or she turns into a monster. So,
right, and
yeah,
we're talking about nipping something in the bud as being a metaphor, which is a phrase that uses words that really can't apply to the thing directly, okay? So it's like another word that sort of represents it. I could say, for example, oh, this situation is the hub of all my woes. Of course, the hub is the middle of a wheel, which means the basis of something, and that's just what's causing me to be all sad and stuff. So that's a metaphor, and here nipping something in the bud is a metaphor as well. It means to halt it at an early stage before something even happens. Halt just means to stop something.
Yeah, if you've ever watched some old movies, especially I remember World War II, some of the soldiers, if they were chasing you, they were chasing people trying to escape from the soldiers, they would say, halt, which just means to stop. I know The Sound of Music, which is a musical, one of the famous characters in that movie actually says to the family, halt, and they keep running because they know that they'll be arrested and taken and killed if they don't.
I only saw that movie one time when I was a kid, so I barely remember that scene.
It's so good, Tom.
I did. I actually saw it in the theater, and that probably tells you how old I am. But in any case here, yes, it means to halt something at an early stage before it begins, before it starts to get bigger or causing more trouble. And here we've got an example. When my son started using bad words he had learned from his friends, I knew I had to nip that behavior in the bud. I basically had to tell my son to stop using bad words or I would wash his mouth out with soap.
Ooh.
And he would regret that. And I should mention that nipping something in the bud usually applies to something negative, okay? You want to use this before something bad happens. The company has some problems with employees being late to work every morning, so we need to nip this problem in the bud and have a meeting and scream at them for doing that.
Right. So, yeah, it's something bad that starts out small but can get even worse if you don't do something about it as soon as you can. Here's the next one. To turn over a new leaf. Now, I'll admit, until I read the explanation of this idiom today, I was thinking that it meant a leaf that's attached to a plant. But it's not. That's not its origin or where it came from. So this idiom, it says, is misleading. If something's misleading, it gives you the wrong idea or the wrong impression of something that's going on. Sometimes you watch the news and some of their stories can be misleading. Maybe they color the story a little bit or they leave out important parts. That's misleading somebody. And some people will try this. Maybe they don't think they're telling a real lie, but they aren't telling you all the truth either. So it can be misleading. So this idiom happens to be misleading because the word leaf here doesn't refer to something that's attached to a flower or a plant. It's something that's in a book.
Right. I had heard this before, and I just assumed it was referring to a leaf on a tree.
Me too.
Even though I didn't quite know exactly why we used that. But now we're going to find out exactly what that word leaf is referring to. We have to go back to the 16th century, or the 1500s. And during that time, this word referred to a page in a book. Okay, so I guess with early English usage, the word leaf meant a page in a book. It could also probably have meant a leaf in a tree, but it also referred to a page in a book. And I think that applies to other languages as well. They often use the word leaf to refer to a page in a book.
But here it says, instead of meaning a leaf that's on some living plant or what have you, it actually means flipping a page in a book or turning a page in a book. To flip, we use this verb when we want to talk about a motion that includes things like tossing a coin into the air, flip a coin. If you've ever watched sports games on TV, to decide which team gets to kick off first or gets to bat first, they will flip a coin. Well, actually, in baseball, they don't need to. The home team gets to have the last at bat. But in football, they'll flip a coin. They go to the middle of the field, and both sides are there, and the referee or the ump, they'll throw that coin or toss that coin into the air. That's flipping a coin. You can flip your hair behind your shoulder. Girls, usually the girls have longer hair. You can flip that way. You can flip someone off, which means you use a finger on your hand to do an obscene gesture. I don't recommend that. But here it just means flipping or turning casually a page in a book.
Flip can also be a noun. If you jump off a diving board in the swimming pool and spin around in the air forward, that's a forward flip. You can do a back flip, etc. But here, flip is being used as a verb. And that's where we're going to take a break right now. So stay tuned, listen to our Chinese teacher, and we'll be right back.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今明2天要带大家一起来活用一些含有植物意义的片语哦，这样子我们的英文讲起来就很自然。好，我们先看一下第2句的花 flower， 因为在我们第一个片语当中也有出现花这个字，所以我们等一下就会来比较一下。首先呢，这里第2句的花 flower 这个字是一个很普遍很概用的，只要是花都可以用 flower。可是我们第一个片语呢叫做 nip something in the bud， 这个 nip 呢其实就是去碾掉、捏掉、洗掉的意思。那 bud 的 bud 其实就是花蕾，所以花蕾如果你把它捏死的话，它就不会开花啦。也就是说其实我们根本就不要它开花或结果，它是一种 metaphor， 它其实是一种隐喻的意思，就是有一些事情在很早的时候或者是还没开始，我们就要把它停掉。好，那为什么会 今天会谈到这件事情呢，当然是要阻止不好的事情啊，阻止一些比如说脏话啦、抽电子烟啊这些事情。但回到正题，我们刚刚说的 flower 是文意上面可以涵盖很多，只要是花都可以用 flower。可我们在第一个片语当中的第一句有没有看到一个叫做 bloom B-L-O-O-M？ 这个 bloom 如果当动词就有花盛开的意思。可是这个花呢，通常都是指比较矮型盆栽类的花，像什么这个雏菊啊，或者是什么这个海棠类的啊，我们养在窗台啊比较矮的那一些。可是很多的树也会开花树的花则会用另外一个字叫做 blossom B-L-O-S-S-O-M blossom。 像 bloom 跟 blossom 这两个字都是动名词同一个字，可以当动词的开花，或者是树的花 blossom， 或者是比较矮的那一种观赏用的花就可以叫做 bloom。 好，那接着同样在这个片语当中，我们特别注意一下，在第二句有一个补充说明非限定用法的关系子句，它的先行词就是逗点前面这个 horticulture。这个所谓的 horticulture 就是所谓的园艺学，逗点之后的 where 一直到句尾是补充说明，在园艺学当中，这个片语的意思就是不要让这个植物开花，甚至或结果。所以我们可能会有一点困扰，就是说这里的 where 到底为什么会用副词呢？其实在这里教大家一个很简单的辨识的方法，因为副词可以修饰整个句子，也就是完整的句子。那完整的句子的意思就是有主词也有受词，所以我们现在就从动词出发，只要在关系子句找到括号，确定它的关系子句在这边，我们就先来找动词。例如在这句话当中看到的动词叫做 prevent， 那么英文的主词一定会在动词前面，所以 prevent 的前面如果已经有主词，像这一句的 cutting or nipping the bud， 而 prevent 后面也出现了受词 it， 甚至连介系词的 from 后面都加上了受词 flowering or becoming fruit，就表示这个句子不缺主词受词，它是一个完整的句子。那只要是完整的句子就可以无限添加副词啊。那当然在这里的逗点之后关系词就会用关副，指的就是在园艺学当中它的意思是什么。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. This is our fun unit. And I have to admit, I really enjoy idioms and learning about where they came from, how they got started. Some of our idioms are so old that even as we try to study the history of them, many people have different interpretations or origin stories on some of these. But these are mostly pretty clear. We know where they came from for the most part. When we started out, we started talking about getting to the root of something, which means you want to know what the real issue is, what the real problem is, and not just some of the consequences. Get to the root of something so you can figure out how to change something. There's nip something in the bud. It's usually a negative type of action or behavior that you want to stop. And so you want to stop it early rather than letting it develop into something really bad or awful. So you want to nip that in the bud and then turn over a new leaf. We talked about this right before the break. Most people think it's referring to a leaf on a living plant or a tree, but it's not. It's referring to a page in a book. So you're flipping a page, a leaf of a book.
Right, but the idiom evolved to mean starting over. It can be used when someone is transitioning to a new career or making an effort to change their conduct for the better. So if you transition, that means you change from one thing to another. It's similar to the word transform, but that refers more to the actual form of something changing from one thing into another. To transition refers usually to a kind of situation. You may want to do a transition in in your life. The transition from going to high school to going to university, it can be quite different. You're going to have a roommate and you'll be more responsible for yourself. So you can transition to a new career, as we say here. You got sick of your old job working in the restaurant washing dishes, and you decided to go to night school and get some education, and now you're going to start a new career as a legal assistant or something like that. So yes, we do use this term to talk about transitioning from one thing to another, to turn over a new leaf. Or it also refers to changing your conduct or your behavior for the better. Like in the past, maybe you did a lot of drinking and smoking, and you got into a lot of fights, and you hung out with all the wrong people, and you got in trouble. You went to jail, and you decided, I'm going to turn over a new leaf and become a new person. I'm not going to do those things anymore. I'm going to change for the better.
Yeah, we'll often use this when people feel like they're on a road to nowhere. They're going down a bad path or the wrong path, and they want to change their lives, so they're going to turn over a new leaf. Now, this refers to something that's not so positive, changing to something that is positive. We don't use turn over a new leaf to talk about changing something that is good or positive to something that's bad or worse. So it's always a good thing. Someone might think they smoke too much and they want to turn over a new leaf, quit smoking, try to get healthy again. You can use that. He's decided to turn over a new leaf, and he has quit smoking. Or somebody who doesn't study enough before tests can turn over a new leaf and maybe start studying every day instead of doing the crash study at the last minute before a test comes, and that's never really helpful.
And here we've got an example with this idiom. The criminal turned over a new leaf by volunteering to help the homeless. Indeed, that is an example of turning over a new leaf and becoming a new person. Now, here's the next idiom that has to do with plants: beat around the bush. And this phrase comes from medieval times, also referred to as the Middle Ages. Hunters would appoint people to hit bushes with sticks to scare the animals out. If you appoint someone, that means you give someone a job to do. It could also be phrased as to assign someone, to give them an assignment or to give them a job. So hunters would appoint people to hit bushes with sticks because there would be animals inside the bushes, which are like short little trees, and they wanted to scare them out so they could shoot them and kill them and take them home and cook them.
Probably back then, yeah. Maybe there were rabbits or foxes in the bushes. I don't know. So they would hit the bush with sticks. So it says here they would strike the bush directly. What's a bush? It's kind of like a small tree. I always think of a bush as just being a little tiny tree. And they kind of grow kind of fat. They grow horizontally instead of vertically, so you keep them trimmed so they don't look so messy. You want to clip your bushes. So they would hit. Strike is another word for hit. So they would strike the bush. As doing so could be dangerous. They couldn't just hit the bush because who knows what would come out at them. It says here, so they would literally beat around the bush. So instead of coming at something directly, you kind of hint at it. You know, maybe it's a sensitive topic and you don't know how to start talking about it. So you just slowly make sort of indirect comments and you hope that somebody will pick up on your clues. But it's best just to go straight forward. Don't beat around the bush. Sometimes people will say this to you. Maybe you're talking to a work colleague and it seems like they're trying to tell you about a problem, but it's not clear, and you can just say, hey, stop beating around the bush. Just tell me.
Right. You could also say, please come to the point. Quit being so verbose. Quit being so 啰嗦, because you need to just tell me exactly what you feel and not beat around the bush. I think I've also heard people say beat about the bush. I think that's also...
That's British, I think.
I think so, but you might hear that used in different situations. And again, this means not being direct. You avoid something or you dodge a question. To dodge means to avoid something. If something's thrown at you, you move aside so it doesn't hit you. That's why we have the game dodgeball in school.
It's fun.
People throw balls at you and try to hit you, and then you need to dodge out of the way. so that they don't hit you. And also, there's a team in Los Angeles called the Los Angeles Dodgers.
That's right.
I guess they dodge pitches or something
I think
that.
a Dodger back in the old days, at least in England, they were usually little boys on the street who would steal things.
Oh,
they were very fast. They could dodge and get away from the people who were trying to race after them and catch them because they would usually be hungry and try to steal food. Well, here's the example, guys. Don't beat around the bush and just tell me why you're annoyed with me. Yes, sometimes people will be mad at you, but they give you the silent treatment, which means they don't talk to you, they don't look at you, and you're supposed to figure out why they're mad. And this is something you can use. Don't beat around the bush. Just tell me why you're annoyed with me. If you're annoyed with somebody, they've irritated you, they've made you mad about something.
Right, so today we learned some fun idioms to get to the root of something, to nip something in the bud, to turn over a new leaf, and to beat around the bush, usually used in the negative. Don't beat around the bush and come to the point. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's turn things over now to our Chinese teacher.
好，所以接下来我们刚刚也有听到外师讲啊，这边的第二个片语当中 turn over a new leaf 的那个 leaf 其实不是那种叶子的意思。当然在16世纪，当时这个 leaf 指的是书里面的一个 page， 所以 turn over a new leaf 其实是翻开了一个新的书页，那就指的是重新开始的意思。我们要特别看一下这个片语当中第4句有一个动词叫做 evolve。因为其实高中有一些英文单字的，它是可以拆成字根啊、字首甚至字尾这样子才会比较好记忆。像这个字的 evolve V-O-L-V 啊，这个 volve V-O-L-V-E 它其实就有 roll R-O-L-L 或者是 turn around 转的意思。那字首的 e 呢有 out 出去，所以转出去你就想好像是把一卷地毯往外展开的感觉，它就有演化的意思。像我们平常很常用的 involve， 也就是在 volve 前面加上 in involve， 它就变成有卷进来、有牵扯在内、包含什么内容物的意思。甚至还可以出现另外一个字叫做 revolve， 也就是在 volve 前面加上 re， 那这个 re 的字首就有 back 或者是 again， 所以一直转一直转一直转一直转，地球的公转啊、轮子旋转啊，这个都可以用 revolve。好，接下来最后面我们就看一个片语叫做 beat around the bush。bush 就是所谓的矮的灌木丛嘛，那这个片语其实是源自于中古世纪的时候，因为当时的猎人就是会先用棍子去敲打灌木丛的旁边，不可以直接去打灌木丛哦，因为这样可能会很危险的。同样在这个片语当中，第2句我们刚刚说，因为这样做会很危险啊，这里有一个连接词的 as， 再提醒大家 as如果当连接词，也就是后面出现有主词跟动词，例如在这里的主词是 doing so， 动词就是 could be， 那这个时候就表示 as 当连接词，它就有3种意思，可能是 when、because 或者是如同好像3个意思，你就要根据上下文来去判断。所以现在如果说真的在灌木丛旁边打一打的，就是表示不直接躲开一些事情，甚至有逃避问题啊、拐弯抹角这个意思。我们明天还会看更多有关于植物的片语，别走开哦。我是安娜，明天见。
That's all the time we have for today, everybody, but please tune in next time when we continue to talk about idioms that are based on plants. We look forward to seeing you then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.